There are more than 4.5 million podcasts indexed worldwide. Only about 1 in 10 has released an episode in the last 3 months. And by the most cited estimate, roughly 99% of all podcasts never turn a profit. So the medium is enormous, the barrier to entry is almost nothing, and yet the income, for nearly everyone, is also almost nothing. The interesting question isn't whether podcasting can pay. A few hundred shows prove it can. The question is what actually separates the ones that pay a salary from the millions that pay nothing. We ran the numbers on going full-time in audio. First, define the target. A full-time podcast income doesn't mean a viral clip or a one-time brand deal. It means replacing a normal salary, reliably, month after month, net of hosting and editing costs. Call that realistic bar somewhere around $40,000 to $60,000 a year, repeating. Now, here's the structural split the whole question turns on. Podcast money does not come from listeners pressing play. It comes from one of two completely different engines. The first is advertising, sponsors paying for access to your downloads. And it behaves like a volume business, where you need a genuinely large audience before the math even starts to work. The second is direct audience support, memberships, premium feeds, paid communities, merchandise. And it behaves like a small business, where a small number of devoted fans can carry the rent. Almost everyone who actually makes a full-time living from podcasting leans hard on the second engine. The advertising numbers explain exactly why. Start with the advertising engine, because the math is brutally simple and almost nobody runs it before launching. Ads are priced on cost per mil. Dollars paid per 1,000 downloads of an episode. A pre-recorded spot pays roughly $15 to $30 per 1,000. A host-read endorsement, the higher value format, runs about $25 to $40. Only in premium niches like business and finance do rates climb past $50, even past $100 per 1,000. So take a typical mid-tier rate of $25 per 1,000 downloads with 2 ad slots per episode. A show pulling 1,000 downloads an episode earns about $50 per episode. Publish weekly, and that is roughly $2,600 a year. That is not a salary. That is a phone bill. To reach a $40,000 salary on advertising alone, at that rate, you need on the order of 300,000 downloads every single month. And then, again the month after that. Now, layer the audience reality on top of that math, and the advertising engine collapses for almost everyone. The download distribution is savagely top-heavy. Only about 7% of podcasts ever reach 5,000 downloads per episode, the rough floor where even modest direct ad deals become possible. Only about 2% clear 20,000 downloads, the range where sponsors start coming to you with consistent offers. And the 300,000 downloads a month you'd need for an advertising salary sits far out in a fraction of 1% of all shows. So when someone tells you podcasting is a great way to make money, ask which podcast they mean. For the overwhelming majority, advertising income is not a living, it is loose change. The download lottery is real, and a few hundred shows win it spectacularly, but you cannot build a career plan around landing in the top 1% of 4.5 million. Now the engine that actually pays the bills for working podcasters. Instead of selling 1,000 strangers to an advertiser, you sell something directly to the few hundred people who genuinely love the show. Look at the math, because it inverts everything. A premium feed or membership at $7 a month, with 500 paying subscribers, brings in $3,500 every month, about $42,000 a year, regardless of whether last week's episode underperformed. 500 true fans. Not 300,000 downloads. The scale of this engine is not a guess. On Patreon alone, podcasters earned $629 million in 2025, up a third in a single year, making podcasting the platform's single largest earning category. More than 47,000 podcasters earn money there, across 7.5 million paid memberships. That is the real income map of audio. Not advertising spread thin across millions of downloads, but support concentrated among the listeners who care most. But before either engine can pay, the show has to survive. And most don't. The single most overlooked number in podcasting is the drop-off curve. Roughly a quarter of all shows have exactly 1 episode and nothing more. Only about a third ever reach 10 episodes. Between 30 and 60% of new podcasts go silent within their first 6 to 12 months, a pattern the industry literally calls pod fade. This matters enormously because both income engines compound on consistency. Advertisers buy shows with reliable, growing download numbers. Members pay for a feed they trust will keep producing. Neither rewards a podcaster who quits at episode 7 which is statistically right where most quit. The brutal truth is that the biggest predictor of podcast income isn't audio quality or topic or even talent. It is simply still being there after 2 years, when the vast majority of the competition has already disappeared. Here is the pattern that ties it all together. The podcasters who actually sustain a full-time income almost never do it from one source. They run a portfolio. A working full-time show typically stitches together 4 or 5 income lines at once. Host-read sponsorships, a paid membership or premium feed, affiliate commissions, merchandise, occasional live events, and sometimes a newsletter or course built on the same audience. No single line pays the rent. The combination does. And the show itself often functions less as the product and more as the engine that builds the audience every other line sells to. This is the exact opposite of how podcasting gets marketed. The pitch sells the dream of a sponsor cutting you a fat check for talking into a microphone. The reality is a diversified small business where the podcast is the top of a funnel and the owner monetizes the relationship, not the download. So, can you really make a full-time income as a podcaster? The honest answer is yes, but almost never the way it gets sold to you. If your plan depends on advertising revenue scaling up to a salary, you are betting on landing in the top 1% of 4.5 million shows by raw download volume. Go in clear-eyed about exactly those odds. But if your plan is built on the support engine, a small devoted audience you serve directly through memberships, premium content, and a stack of 4 or more income lines, that is a real business. And a few $100s from a few hundred true fans is far more reachable than a few 100,000 downloads from strangers. And the single sharpest filter is this one question: does your podcast plan depend on getting big or on getting believed? Reach is a lottery you barely control. Devotion is something you can earn one listener at a time. The full-time podcasters are, overwhelmingly, the ones who chose to be believed by a few rather than heard by everyone.